This is Hannibal here from the Hannibal TV on YouTube, and today we have a UFO slash UAP podcast with none other than the co-owner of the Contact in the Desert convention, which is the largest UFO convention in the entire world, as well as the US, obviously. Captain Ron Jennings, one of the busiest men in the world.
We are busy, man. It's already feels like the event's like 2 weeks away and it's 3 months out, but we're already working all day. That's just how it is. It's all part of it though. That's fine.
And you just told me some really cool news about a new guest that was just confirmed. Is that public information yet?
Well, it hasn't been because I just found out myself within the hour, so it's brand new information. It's true. We just landed Ross Colhart to join us at Contact in the Desert this year. We had hoped he was going to be able to make it, so it's been kind of a placeholder, and he just confirmed. So we're really excited about adding him to the lineup.
Wow. And for people that don't know, he is from News Nation and he also has his own podcast, but obviously his bigger interviews have been the David Grush one, recently the Jacob Barber. He's done some with Gary Nolan, many with Blue Elizondo. Do you have a favorite of Mr. Coldheart's?
Well, you know, that first one you just mentioned, David Grosh, when that happened, it just so happened it was 2023 and it was the last day of Contact in the Desert. So we had heard that this was going to come out and we kind of stopped our event and we all kind of gathered around one room and all the attendees at Contact in the Desert and many of the speakers came in and we watched that happen live on TV at Contact in the Desert, which was made it a lot more fun.
Have you heard any news about what's going on with David Grush? He kind of went dark lately.
Well, the biggest thing that I've recently heard, which I was shocked by, every time you saw him testify or you hear people talk about it, it's the frustrating thing is us watching it, as I'm sure you felt, brother, is that he always says, well, I can't talk about that in a public forum. I can't talk about that in a public forum. I'll tell you in a skiff so they could talk privately in a secure location. He's never done that. They have not called him in to do that. I think that's insane. They should have got him in there the next day, don't you think?
Yeah, what is the reason on that? I heard that it had something to do with his security clearance.
Yeah, there's some weird thing that some of the guys that want to interview him don't have the clearance. So they don't even know what they can ask him because they don't know what he knows. It's kind of one of these weird things, but I think that's bullshit. I mean, I think let him in there. Let him just tell you what he knows.
Yeah, and is it this year that you're going to have George Knapp and George Norrie on
We
the
are.
same stage? Yeah.
We're going to do an open lines live, just like they do on Coast to Coast, but we're going to do it live in that room in the Crystal Ballroom with George and George again. It's great. Those guys are legends.
Yeah. Have you seen the new Investigation Alien series on Netflix that Knapp is one of the hosts of?
I have it queued up. I'm going to watch it later. I have not watched it yet. Is it good?
It's pretty good. Yeah. I liked the Brazil episode and the water episode are both my favorites. And then there was the Phoenix Lights episode that I also thought was pretty good. There's 6 altogether.
Everything Knapp's involved with, I think, is excellent. I think he's one of the best journalist researchers out there that we have. It's a great honor to have him at Contact. He's great.
There's also one on cattle mutilations. What are your thoughts on that? That's a big topic.
Well, it is. And I always wonder, do these things really tie in with the UFO phenomenon? There are, the crop circles, the mutilations. There's a lot of these different little subcategories and, they're their own subjects in their own right. I don't know that it necessarily ties in with aliens. It might. It's certainly peculiar. Linda Moulton Howe did a lot of stuff on this for years. I don't know. It's hard to know what to believe,
Yeah, the one thing about their episode for Investigation Aliens on the cattle mutilations is in an area where they'd been having a lot of animal mutilations in general. Somebody caught like a cell phone video of what appeared to be a gray with a bunch of elk.
No way. Is it
Yeah.
clearly a gray or is it like a smudge?
A little bit more than a smudge.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, you
I
can
always
see
get
the eyes
disappointed when
and a
people tell us
body.
about videos and then you see them and it's like, well, is that an alien or is that smoke? It's really hard to say sometimes.
Yeah, and that reminds me of the whole drones where there was some actual drones, there was some military drones, clearly some helicopters, another airplane, and a lot of people would get really excited and send pictures of stuff that was clearly not a UAP. There appeared to be some stuff that was more along the lines of UAP up there, though. What was your take on all of that and Donald Trump's official response?
Well, I feel the way this whole thing was handled, I think it's clearly not, to me, alien in nature or a true UAP. I feel like it's probably some sort of military drone. There's no way, to me, an adversary, even if they had a little drone, they'd let that fly over airspace or the military bases like that was happening. I think they would shoot that thing down immediately. And then, you know, the commercial drones that people buy on Amazon, they're little and they can only last so long. These things are supposedly the size of a car. They're up there for 8, 9, 10 hours. It's clearly not just a little commercial drone, in my view. Therefore, it's a military thing. And the response from the Biden administration and then from Trump's administration, it was like, don't do anything about it. Don't shoot it down. And I think their wording was something to the effect of the FAA knows about it and it's doing research. Don't worry about it. And they just really dismissed it quick. So my suspicion is that it's probably something like a military level drone or police level drone that is looking for dirty bombs or looking for nuclear, detection. It's probably something like that. They don't want to make that announcement. Hey, we're missing nuclear waste, or we're worried about a dirty bomb in this area. They don't want to say that. So I think that's what it was. That's my best guess. That's the best story I've heard so far.
And well, that is a fairly unsatisfactory story to most of us. It's better than the Biden administration saying nothing unusual is going on here. This could be a 16-year-old kid's drone, but there was clearly more activity at that time
Yeah.
because it's not happening now, and it wasn't happening to that extent before. And if it is happening now, like some people still say, it's not to the point where everybody cares anymore because
It's
it
dropped
seems,
right
yeah,
out of the news cycle. Absolutely. Yep.
yeah. And I think if it was still going on to that intensity, it would still be in the news. I don't think people would just stop caring if they were still.
This community alone, brother, would not let that go. You know how this is. They'll get on Twitter. They'll get this out there. We would be all on top of it. That's the great thing about this community is there's so many people that are actively involved in staying on top of this stuff and checking everything. I love it.
You got a fan on here that wants to know if you find there is too much noise and distraction with the different subjects that get attributed to aliens and UFOs, such as mutilations, abductions, and psionics.
I do. I do think there's way too much noise. I think a lot of this is distraction by design. I think a lot of these things are to push this subject aside and don't worry about this. Just the way they dismiss the drones, don't worry about them, and the FAA's got it. Same thing with the alien and the UFO topic. They always are just like brushing that along. They want people to just kind of not talk about it because I think there are some people that probably know something, certainly within our government. Therefore, they don't want to come out with it, so they want you to look the other way too. I think a lot of these things are intentionally distractions.
How did you first become interested in the UFO subject? And clearly, you're doing the biggest UAP convention in the world right now. You're pretty much dedicating a large chunk of your life to it now. What's caused you to reach this level where you're fully invested in it now?
I started off, in the 80s. I read Communion and I read Chariots of the Gods. And I felt like both of those books were really compelling to me. And I got really interested in the subject just for fun. And then I listened to Art Bell for fun over the years. And I really enjoyed that. And I thought, there's some serious stuff going on here. Why aren't more people talking about it? and I kind of fell into a podcast about 12 years ago called Truth Be Told. And I got more and more involved, and I did a lot of interviews and met a lot of these guys, and became very enthralled with the subject. And then, luckily, the way things worked out, I went to Contact in the Desert for many, many years and got to know the owners and got to be involved with them. And I love this event. I think they take it very serious. And God bless it, Gordon ended up buying it. He had Gordon Peckrell had run the UFO MegaCon out of Laughlin, and he bought Contact in the Desert. And luckily, he brought me in to partner with him. So now I produce the event with him, and I love it. And yes, I dedicate a huge part of my life to this. And it's truly a love. And that's how all of our staff is. We all are very immersed in this subject and we enjoy it. So it's a labor of love, man. And very lucky in that way.
As far as the speakers you choose, which you obviously have some big stars and also some very credible ones, you also have lesser known people, and you have some that are more out there, more speculative, let's say. How do you balance all of that when you're booking these people?
Well, we all get together. We have a whole committee of us that sit around and we go through. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of speakers that have interesting topics. And we want to bring back classic people, but we don't want to do the same show we did last year. We always want it to be fresh. We want it to be new. We want to be what people are talking about now. You mentioned psionics earlier. That's hot now. So we're kind of focusing on that. Last year, we focused on AI. We want to keep current and bring in the most current information. But then you also want to bring in people that maybe others haven't heard of. They're doing great work and great research. And we do very heavily lean into more scientific, more academic side of things. But this topic naturally attracts the sort of the woo side. So we do dip our foot into that a little bit too, because it's all part of the same big picture. So we just try to take the best approach we can and kind of bring in a nice mix so you get a little flavor of all the different areas in this topic.
And as a researcher and podcaster yourself in this subject, how do you sift through everything and decide what you're going to believe? For instance, the psionics, that's really hard for a lot of people to believe that people can control these UAP crafts now. A lot of people are talking about this. That takes a lot of people right out of the subject as far as interest. How do you decide and manage all of this?
The second I heard that during Jake Barber's thing live, I was like, people are hitting the clicker right now. Certainly to a wide mainstream audience, I think that's very hard to accept. It's hard for me to accept because I live right in the middle. I mean, I am trying to be as rational and open-minded as I can at the same time. I felt the minute that happened in that show, I was like, boy, a lot of people are not going to like this. It's one thing to think maybe there's lights in the sky, maybe they're extraterrestrial. Now we're driving the ships. I think that's a bridge too far for most people, including myself. I think that's even a bigger stretch to believe. But there seems to be some interesting research happening in the area of psionics. Diane Hennessy Powell doing the famous telepathy tapes right now. We're going to have her live at our conference, and they're going to be talking about the incredible work that's happening with autistic, nonverbal children that seem to be able to telepathically communicate with their mothers. So that's she's out of Harvard and Johns Hopkins. So that's a scientific look at a difficult subject right there.
Supposedly they can communicate with other of these autistic people non-verbally as well, right?
Yes, that's what I hear. It's incredible to think. I mean, these kids can't even talk at all. I mean, they have no way of communicating. The way Diane phrased it to me is they think that in the first 2 years of life, these children are unable to communicate at all or say hungry or to anything. In fact, they don't even know they have arms, hands, and fingers. And it's almost like a Helen Keller thing where they have to be taught that they have limbs and they have fingers and they can point to letters. And it's very difficult to raise these children. And it seems like somehow they think their brains think of a way to communicate because they can't physically do it. So they do it telepathically. She thinks even it's possible that humans did this 100,000 years ago and it just kind of went away. And then now, we're seeing it in these special cases. It's fascinating.
You've recently added Kelly Chase from the UFO Rabbit Hole podcast, I think it's called. She recently put out a video that got a lot of attention, basically saying she's not because she's coming to your convention, but saying she's tapping out of the UAP world because people like Lou Elizondo, she believes, are still working for the government and so forth. She doesn't really trust people. What do you make on that video if you've seen it?
I have not seen that video. I know Kelly very well. She's awesome. She's sort of new to the topic. It's only been a handful of years, five or 6 years, I think she's been involved in the community, but she took a deep dive in research. I deeply respect the work she's done. Her and J. Christopher King have an awesome documentary of their own right on Apple TV right now on Coppolis or something like that. It's called. It's really good. And yes, there's a lot of backlash in this community about who to trust. These guys from Lou Elizondo to Richard Doty. These guys, Richard Doty was a disinformation agent back in the day, and now he says that he's coming clean. How do you trust somebody that does that? And if Lou's still tied to the government, people do struggle to trust these things. The problem with this world is all of these things are unknowns, and we don't know. We don't know if the alien thing is truly real, and we don't know if the people that are telling us about it or coming out from the government are being authentic. And that's very challenging. So that's the hardest part about being in this community, is to trying to sift through misinformation, disinformation, and what may in fact be real.
One guy that's a bit of a hard pill to swallow, but there was enough credibility in him for James Fox to put him in his recent documentary, is Jason Sands, who I'm sure you're familiar with. What are your thoughts on him?
It's so funny how you're nailing these things, because when I watched his movie, The Program, I personally felt that was the strongest thing James Fox has done. All of his movies are good, but I thought this was my favorite for me, The Program.
I agree with that.
Yeah, he's going to show it at Contact in the Desert. He's going to be there live. He's going to show that, and he's going to talk about it after. But being perfectly honest with you, when I watched it, that was the one little segment that I struggled with, the Jason Sands thing. These guys, nobody has enough proof that to trust them. So it's very difficult to make that leap. So I understand how people are apprehensive. I'm very apprehensive. That's why we try our mission statements to sort of try to get to as close to the truth as we can.
The one thing that stands out about Jason Sands to me that he's talked about in other podcasts he's done is he gives a lot of credibility to Charles Hall and his Tall White story.
Yeah.
That, to me, I've read the books. There's a lot of red flags about Charles Hall. So just Jason Sands acting like that's a gospel makes me wonder a little bit.
I share that exact feeling, brother. I feel the same way. And a lot of these things are tough. I do feel, to me, there are a couple of, not more than a couple, but there's a limited number of things that I find to be really strong cases, and that keeps me stuck to this. I do like Whitley Strieber. I do like the work of Van Daniken, as I've mentioned. I know these are cliche, but I feel like Rendlesham and Roswell are very, very, very strong cases. And if you take the time to research those cases or read the books by Don Schmidt and what's his name? I forgot his name. The partner with Don Schmidt. Those guys have written incredible books on Roswell that have a lot of different players, each playing a different role that fits into the narrative of the Roswell story. And it's very, very compelling. We have deathbed confessions. I don't know why a colonel in the Army would do a deathbed confession because he wants his granddaughter to know that we're not alone. That's very compelling to me. The work of John Mack is very compelling to me. So I have a limited number of really strong cases that are enough for me to believe that there's something more going on here. Then there's the rest of it. And I'm sure a lot of that is garbage. I'm sure a lot of it is wrong. I'm sure a lot of it is misinformation or just disinformation or misidentifications. But because I seem to find enough gems out there, there could be some kernels of truth in some of these other stories too. And I think it's part of a whole mosaic. That's my view.
One of the interesting feuds in the UFO world that I find entertaining as someone from the wrestling world is Lou Elizondo and Stephen Greer both severely questioning each other's credibility. What do you make of those two these days?
Well, I think it's hysterical how both these guys have these sort of outlandish, strong claims, and yet they both criticize each other. And then there are people in the community, of course, these are very polarizing, controversial figures, that there are people that love them and there are people that don't like them so much or don't trust them. And I don't know. I'm torn. I've met both of them. I've interviewed both of them. I feel like there's at least a percentage of what each of them says that it's true. And that's almost enough. These are difficult things because how do we know? That's the problem with this. There's no way to know definitively, but I like digging into it and getting as close as we can to the truth, because over time, eventually, we're going to start. The truth will start rising to the top, I hope.
Now, is it possible to rent out the arena in Palm Springs and have a celebrity boxing match with Lou Elizondo versus Stephen Greer for next year's?
I would love it. There it is, main event, steel cage death match right here.
Yeah, that would make a hell of a pay-per-view.
Can you imagine? I'd love it.
Supposedly, Greer can bench 400 pounds. He likes to say a lot, and now we have Elizondo's combat background, so it could be
These guys are
interesting.
fit. I'll tell you, quick side note is I did get a chance to work with Stephen Greer once in Phoenix, and we did this big hike, and I was kind of like sort of interviewing him on the hike. We were having this discussion. That guy, I could barely keep up with him. Barely keep up with him. I mean, he is really genuinely in shape, and I think he's like what, 67? Something like that.
Yeah, and this is some people say that he might be a hybrid. And
Well,
that just makes you think about that. And he certainly looks like he could be one, but what do you make of hybrids? Yeah, what do you I'm just joking
yeah, I
here, but
struggle with the hybrid thing. I feel like that's one of those things that may be a bridge too far too. Although I do love the work of what's that professor's name that studies the abduction cases? Gosh, what's that guy's name? That they hypnotize the claimed abductees. What is his name? Oh my gosh, I can't believe I can't think of it. Regardless, there's a lot of these guys that study these people, and that seems to be a reoccurring theme in the abduction folklore, is that these people they're taking babies and they're making hybrid creations. I think that's possible. The fact that they're walking around among us, or you meet people that are hybrids, that's too far for me. I struggle with that. I don't know that they've gotten there. I have a real hard time with that. But David Jacobs is the doctor I was thinking of. Dr. David Jacobs, his thing was, under hypnosis, he has thousands of cases, Bud Hopkins as well, where they found people who claim this is the thing, and women wake up and they've lost their baby, and then they say they got taken to a ship and they see this being that's seems to be their child, and they get presented that's a story that comes up over and over and over, even under hypnosis. So I do feel there is something there, and that does seem to be like something that could be happening. It's fascinating. But saying that they're walking among us, or people walk up or claim to be a hybrid, it is tough for me to believe that.
one of the things about, and someone else is bringing Whitley Strieber up in the chat, I've heard him say recently on the record that one way to spot a potential hybrid is chain smoking because they're very nervous.
I heard that
They'll
as
chain
well. He said
smoke.
smoking. He also said, and I thought this was fascinating. Whitley said that if someone walks up and tells you they're a hybrid, they're not, because they would tell you telepathically. Thought that was interesting too. I don't know. That's way too small of a sample size for me to buy into. And I love Whitley. I think he's love having him in the community. I think it's really strong because when I read his book, I loved it. I was open to it, but of course, that skeptical side of me, which is a strong part of me, thought this guy's a science fiction writer. Of course, he could be making this whole thing up. But I feel like he has a stronger argument now because here we are 50 years later. He is stuck to every word. He is still knee deep in this community. He is still doing podcasts. He's still doing interviews. He's making appearances. So I feel like his credibility has done nothing but go up, as opposed to if he did that book and then 5 years later it kind of went away and he said, well, yeah, I wrote that or whatever. I feel like it's a really strong case.
And he does also do very good research into UAPs in general. But then there is the only things that make me question them here and there is like where he was talking about, for instance, a possible midget hybrid that was breaking into his house that reeked of cigarette smoke and sleeping in his guest room, and he was finding piles of cigarettes all around his house. I mean, I'm something like that just makes me be like, okay, that's a lot to swallow.
That's a lot to swallow. I feel that's very difficult. He's got a lot of areas of research too beyond just abduction, and he's got a variety of experiences, and he does also claim that there's something to do with the visitors, which he calls them the visitors, and that whole phenomenon. He thinks it could be related to the afterlife. Perhaps it's souls or something tied in there. He's not sure what, but he does say that there's something related there. And that's come up with other people as well. So I think there might be something to that whole line of thinking as well.
The one interesting thing that he kind of turned me on to, and you may or may not have heard about this, is the horns. I heard him talking about it. He said he would hear these horns uh, as he was about to be abducted or have some type of experience. And he said, if you don't know what the horns are, search up mystery horns online. They're all over the world. And again, this could be fairly easy to fake in some cases, but there's literally thousands of videos with these mystery, like foghorn type things playing like literally in all areas of the world, and people with cell phone cameras like out in their backyard saying like, where is this sound coming from? There's like workers out in the forest playing videos. So, I mean, you could fake it, but it is very unusual.
It is unusual, but I mean, I don't like how people have an anomaly and they assign it to alien. I don't like when people, a lot of the UFO videos you see now, as soon as the thing comes on, there's a light in the sky, they immediately say, hey, look, a UFO. I feel like you should say, hey, what is that? Hey, I don't immediately recognize what this is. We jump to that. It's a UFO. Well, it might be, but let's talk about the other things it could be first. And I've interviewed a lot of people from MUFON and investigators lately, and they all say that they've definitively found a terrestrial explanation for over 95 to 99% of the cases that they get. And I think that that's very accurate. I feel like that is what's happening. In the vast majority of cases, this is a misidentification. This is we don't know what it is. So we make these leaps. At the end of the day, though, there's still 1, 2, or 3% that aren't identified and may in fact be anomalous.
Here's an interesting question from Sage Pup. Do you think there could be hybrids walking among us that aren't aware they're different?
I don't think so. That's a bridge too far for me. I think it's very hard to make that leap. Any of these things, of course, are possible, but no, I personally don't feel that way at all. I don't think that's possible.
someone going back to what we were talking about with Kelly, do you feel there's too much theater in the whole UAP field?
Yeah, there's a lot of things I don't like about the UAP field. There's everybody wants to be the first to the story. They want to be the first to get it out. Just like, but that's the world today. It's nothing to do with the UFO community. The sports community, they want to be the first to say this guy got traded, this guy got signed. That's just the world we live in social media and these little bites. That's kind of the world we live in my view. So I feel like I don't like any of these theatrics. I like the strong cases, the cases that go back, the cases that have a lot of data. I like repeatable things like the David Jacobs work we spoke of earlier. He has a lot of people that have the same story. That's compelling to me. The more of a one-off or a unique case, the Jason Sands case, that's something none of us have ever heard. It's harder to make that leap that this one guy had this one experience. But if you've got 5,000 case studies and 4,800 of them have the same sort of experience, well, that's more compelling. That is data.
I don't know how much you've looked into David Jacobs' research, but I find him pretty interesting. He said a couple things that during his abductions he was asked about a lot was by the alleged aliens is why humans wear hats, and they want to know a lot about hats, and they were also very interested in war.
Yeah, he also has there's funny things where some people claim that there are aliens walking among us, or hybrids, if you will, like the guy earlier asked. And it's funny how they will have things where they seem almost human. They got the glasses and a hat, and you can't really tell. But then they'll be like, they don't know which end of a pen to use, like a simple thing that anybody would know. But they'll be like, they don't know how to do this, or they don't know how to pick up a fork, kind of thing. And that's what like tripped people off. That hey, there's something wrong with this guy. I don't know, man. Hard to say.
And he said they also had like a punishment slash reward system when they were doing these tests on him, and the rewards involved some type of sexual gratification feeling that he really enjoyed.
Well, it's the carrot or or the stick, right? I mean, that's what we as humans do. It's the carrot and the stick. That's been throughout our history. That's the thing. So why wouldn't another civilization exhibit the same sort of thing?
He would be a great guy to bring in that seems to have been pretty quiet, strangely enough, over the past few years. I don't know if that's because of his age or what.
It
Have
is.
you?
It is. That
Yeah.
is why, and that's the only reason why. I think he's great. I think his early work is outstanding. I think he's recorded a lot of stuff, and he's so matter of fact about it. Like he doesn't. He's just like, "Yep, this is what's happening. They're coming here. They're abducting people. We don't know why. It's been going on for 1,000 years, and that's just he's so matter of fact about it."
Just to scroll through your speakers page a bit for the fans, Josh Gates, adventurer, television
You know
personality,
Josh
author.
Gates?
I don't, but it's a great picture.
He he's right there. He's the host of Expedition Unknown, where he goes all over the world and investigates all sorts of mysteries. The the trying to think of the thing with Jesus, the Holy Grail, any sort of mystery that's anywhere on our planet, he investigates. And he's looked at the UFO alien topic as well. I think he's a great addition this year. He's going to be our keynote speaker, and we're really excited about it.
Avi Loeb, I've interviewed him a bunch of times.
I
That's a
love
great
that
guest.
guy. I just interviewed him a couple weeks ago, brother. He is so awesome. I think we need more people like him out there. And he agrees, I got it from him that there's enough here that requires more serious scientific investigation. That's the nature of science. I don't know why we don't put more resource behind it. I think the Galileo project that he's doing is incredible. He's got a new thing with 3 different telescopes where they're going to be able to triangulate different things in the sky. And there's a lot of exciting things happening in his whole world regarding UAPs.
Is there going to be a competition? Who has better hair, you or Daniel Sheehan, or however you pronounce
That
his last
award goes to Danny Sheehan. He is the winner.
name?
He's got some years on me, and he's got a lot of hair. And obviously, Danny is one of the legends in our community. I think he's done more work than just about anyone, and I think he knows more than just about anyone as far as the real stuff. You know what I mean? I love that guy.
Jimmy Church, who has a lot of podcasts, including one with Christina Gomez, who I've interviewed a bunch of times. Great guest, Richard Dolan.
Dolan's legendary. He just came out with his new book series on USOs, which are underwater UFOs, which is great.
Nick Pope, who is a regular guest on this channel.
Yeah, I've heard Nick on your show. Yeah, Nick's great. You know, he's very forthcoming, and I think he's another great quote unquote insider guy. He's a nice voice to have in this community. It's great having him.
And Sarah, who I interviewed last year, I don't smoke weed that much, but I wish I'd smoked something before talking to her. I think it may have helped me understand it better. But she's got some she does a lot of research into what she talks about. But again, that's something that it's a lot to take in. But interesting personality.
Absolutely. That's rounding out that other side of the spectrum. There's Stephen Bassett, of course, pushing for the UAP, for disclosure.
Yeah. It's
Have
interesting. The second time I had Mr. Bassett on, he blew up. He got, I would say, 5 or 6 times as many views as the first. So he's getting really popular lately.
Well, because the UAP disclosure thing right now is hot, as big as it's ever been, and Steve's been a driving force in that, and he does incredible work on that. So I don't know. I hope he's right. Have you been hearing this? I've been doing this about 13 years, and it's only in 2025, which means in the last 8 weeks, have I really heard from credible people like Danny Sheehan, like Dr. Greer, like Stephen Bassett, that there really is some sort of disclosure that we are really on the cusp of. Have you been hearing that?
I think the last time I had Stephen on was in December, and he was saying that there was going to be about 25 whistleblowers testifying in 1 month, coming up around March.
Yeah,
actually.
Yep.
So maybe that's what you're hearing about.
Well, we're talking about nuclear witnesses, and there he is, bottom right there is Robert Salas. We've got Robert Salas and 2 or 3 others that are going to do a nuclear panel. These guys that were in the military and were direct eyewitnesses to a UFO craft flying over that and turning off our missiles. That's incredible. And how, God bless these guys. They've been out of the Army for 50 years, and they're still telling their story.
I just interviewed Bob Salas as well in December. Your Hollywood Disclosure guy, Dan, set that up, so I'll give him a shout out. And he was also abducted, which he doesn't talk about that much, but that was quite a story.
He told me that as well on a recent interview with Bob, and that's incredible. And that happened years after his experience in the Army.
Jennifer Shafter, wow, supermodel look. Who is she?
She comes with Richard Martini, and she's a medium who Richard Martini talks about the Michael Newton idea of where our souls go after we die and communication with the afterlife.
What a shirt on Dr. Pascal Michael. That stands out.
I want that shirt. Yep.
Who is he?
He works with different psychedelics and talks about people that have experienced other forms of of non-human intelligence. Like ayahuasca and that kind of thing and that kind of research.
Yeah. Ayahuasca. Yeah, I've talked to a few UAP related people that take that. What are your thoughts on that?
I would love to. I'm just still scared to death of it, but it's fascinating to me. You hear ayahuasca stories of 2 different people taking ayahuasca and seeing the same being. That's compelling. I don't know what that means, but it's exciting. This is a new thing we're even expanding. We added podcasters this last year. Now we're doing 10 of them. And in fact, we're going to get Ross and Bryce Zabel to do theirs as well. So we're going to have 11 live podcasts interviewing our speakers live on a stage. You can watch it happen. live. So it's going to be a lot of fun. None of us get to ever do this with a live audience. You know what I mean? We do this sitting in our living room. So it's going to be fun to do it live on a stage with an audience. And these are all big, well-known guys. I mean, Jesse Michaels is huge right now. He's doing incredible work. Last podcast on the left, they came last year. They're enormous. They're great guys. They're getting more and more interested in this topic. I love it. It's a lot of fun. And we're also bringing in filmmakers.
Who's funding Jesse Michael? He's practically a filmmaker. He's putting out like a film quality video every week. Who's funding him, or is he just like a multi-millionaire? Because
I don't know how he does it, but he's doing a great job. We really like his work. He did some stuff on Diana. We're going to have 4 world premiere documentaries happen, 5 movies in total. We mentioned the program with James Fox, but we're going to have 4 other movies with Dean Aliotto and a few other filmmakers, brand new, really high quality docs on this topic. So that's another aspect to our show this year that we're really excited about.
Vinny Adams too, from the Disclosure team, a friend of mine.
Yeah, he's a great dude.
There's wonder how many people from the CIA will secretly be attending Contact in the Desert. Who knows?
You know, we hear that all the time, that there's probably somebody checking in. This would be the place to go if you want to know what we know. This would be the place. This is where people exchange ideas, speaker to speaker and speaker to attendee. I mean, this is the hub. We kind of look at this almost like the annual banquet of this community. You know, what happened in the last year? What's happening next? Where are we going? And Contacts felt that way to me for 10 years, and now here we are, you know, trying to keep that rolling.
I'm gonna hope this person is a hybrid and not talking about something else. That's pretty disgusting. Otherwise,
I missed it.
That's
okay.
There you go. Where do you see UFO?
Wow.
Where do you see UFO and paranormal fields heading into the next decade, especially with advancements in technology and public interest?
Well, first of all, I don't see disclosure happening personally. I don't see any reason for them to disclose. But as I mentioned earlier, Avi Loeb is doing amazing stuff with the Galileo project. There are new telescopes coming online that are going to be game changers. I forgot the name of the one in Chile is called like the Large Telescope or something. The Extra Large Telescope is the official name of it. And there's 2 or 3 of these that are like ginormous telescopes that are going to be able to like scan the whole sky in a fraction of the time that we use now. I think the technology and AI itself that's going to be able to analyze data from telescopes is going to really open up this area. You know, throughout history, what's changed things, what's moved the needle has been technology. From us being able to move, you know, a boat to get across the ocean to flying a Concorde across the ocean in 3 hours instead of 3 months. Technology always changes how our beliefs work and how we know about things. And right now we're on the cusp of AI exploding and these new telescopes coming online. I think we're going to have a lot more. We may discover that there are beings out there that have always been there. We just didn't know how to see them. For example, I'll give you 2 great examples that this has happened in the past. Number one, microorganisms. If a couple hundred years ago you said to somebody that, oh, by the way, you have little creatures crawling around on your skin and billions of those crawling around in your stomach, nobody would believe that. But then we got a microscope and we could see them. And now we all know that. A 5-year-old knows that now. Same thing with like the infrared spectrum. We could see things now that we could never see before. There may be a technology just outside our reach that we haven't got yet, that once we do get, maybe there are beings that live in another vibration or another dimension that we will have access to because we have that technology, and then it won't be that big a deal anymore. It's happened times and times before.
Or beings that are on Earth and we're just somehow unaware of them, or in the ocean or somehow underground. What percentage do you think a chance there is that these things are actually crypto terrestrials that have been here all along, or could we be getting a bit of both?
Well, then there's that letter D where it's all of the above. I don't know, but it does seem to me like not only is all of it possible, it could be all simultaneously possible. There could be certain kinds of beings that are still here. I have a hard time believing there are beings living amongst us now. I don't rule it out, but I have a hard time with that. And interdimensional travel, possible, hard again for me to believe because that's a big leap. It's much easier for me to believe somebody could figure out how to travel fast and get here. So it's easy. The old nuts and bolts way of thinking is easier for my brain to digest. But any and all of these things are possible. And there could be beings that are, the soul is also a possibility. There's a lot of forms of non-human intelligence. And I think the most likely contact that we're going to have will be with an artificial intelligence. That's can travel across the sky. It doesn't need to eat. It doesn't get sick. It doesn't take breaks. Why would another?
Von Neumann probes, right?
There
Those
you
type of
go. And then they would replicate and continue to go throughout. Exactly. I think that is by far the most likely scenario. That's what we're going to do. We're going to eventually be sending artificial intelligence out to explore the universe. Why would an advanced civilization not do the same way before they send biological beings? And you see these craft that make these 90-degree turns at 7,000 miles an hour, and they say you can't do that. Yeah, but a computer could. It's not going to, it doesn't have brains that are going to come flying out the side. If it's not a biological being, and that would make more sense. Why would you send a biological being? It just seems, I think AI is the most likely thing that we will first encounter.
Yeah, and there could be illness issues too with a biological being that could catch something or not be able to breathe on this earth or something. Because
Right.
we never even put, like, when talking about the dangers in one of Jamie Foxx or James Fox documentaries, he talks about the police officer that died touching one of these things. There could be like contact issues that could go either way.
Absolutely. When people came back from the moon, they had to like sequester them and everything. They were very worried about cross contamination. And that makes sense. That makes sense.
Have you spoken to any astronauts that are believers in this phenomenon?
I have. I've actually interviewed a couple of them. I interviewed one guy at the 50th anniversary of MUFON. And, when we were doing the interview, he was kind of like, well, pretty mundane about it. Like, well, we saw some things we didn't really know what they were, but nothing really groundbreaking. And then I was like wrapping up and putting away my camera and everything. And then he starts telling me about like other guys that have been out with him that were astronauts who did see things that were really incredible. He didn't want to talk about them on the air for some reason, but he did say that he's talked to astronauts who have seen lights and things moving around their craft up there. Wow, that's pretty fascinating. And you see footage sometimes from like NASA and things that they've captured, and people talk that they could be some sort of craft. Maybe.
Does NASA know more than they let on? Because a lot of people think that Gold guy, I think Michael Gold may have been his name, that testified at the last congressional hearing, was one of the least credible people that testified before Congress so far.
Yeah, I think for sure they do. I mean, they've been looking at this a long time, and I think if there is something to know, why wouldn't they know it? And you hear about them sanitizing photos before they release them and everything. I think it's very plausible to believe that they would know something and they would keep it secret. I think that's a plausible belief.
The last time I talked to you around this time last year, you told me the most credible piece of evidence you'd heard up to that point was the guy that was allegedly abducted with the cell phone, and it actually showed where he was.
That was an interesting thing. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Devil's Den. What's his name? Incident at Devil's Den is his book. Do you remember that guy's name? What is
I'll look it up, but I was
yeah.
wondering if that's still the most credible piece
Well, I
of
thought that was
evidence.
an interesting piece of evidence. I don't know if it's the most credible, but it's certainly a very interesting piece of evidence that they tracked his thing. If I was an abductee, I would have that thing on all the time. I don't know what the most credible piece. I like some of these cases where the whole seems greater than the sum of its parts. Again, I think Roswell, if you dig into the vast amount of knowledge collected about Roswell, you'll find that very credible. There it is. Terry Lovelace, that's his name. Couldn't think of Terry's name. Yeah, he's got an interesting case as well. I think Travis Walton is an incredible case. We've had him to contact several times. He was on the observation deck with us, and we had the pleasure of doing a whole day with him. This is a guy who stuck to that same story for 50 years. In fact, this October will be the 50th anniversary of that. And, they've all passed lie detector tests, and it's such an interesting, unique, credible case. I feel like it's very, very plausible to me. I really do feel like people like him make me lean more into belief.
What's the one question about UFOs or the paranormal that you wish more people would ask, and how would you answer that question?
I wish more people would ask.
Yeah, when they're interviewing guys like Colt Hart, Knapp, all these experts, that gets avoided somehow.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough question. I feel like number one, we're talking about an unknown here. There's no way to know these answers. The more people seem to tell me that they know what's going on, the less I tend to believe them, because these are unknown things. And then there's the idea that is Stephen Greer right? Is Dr. Greer correct in saying that there's a small unacknowledged black project that holds this information? Makes a great science fiction movie, and it also does seem plausible, and it does seem if something this dramatic happened, maybe that is the case. I don't know what else we should be asking these guys. I feel like when we ask people like Arrow or some of these things, those guys don't really know anyway. So they have plausible deniability, and they're not lying because they don't know. I think that it is possible that there is an unacknowledged project that would hold this knowledge. And if they hold it, they're not going to tell anybody, and they're not going to give it to Arrow. Arrow can ask for anything they want. If somebody really has this, that doesn't mean they're going to give it to them.
Have you heard much about this Operation Starfish Prime nuclear detonation in space that Tom DeLonge says may have been a secret operation to actually knock some UAPs out of space?
I've heard of that, and there's other programs and projects they talk about. Again, this is as hard to know as the alien question, because how do we know? These are all just speculative things that people hear something, or we get a FOIA request and we get a little piece of information. We're not seeing the full picture. So again, it's plausible, but we have no way of knowing.
How do you deal with skeptics that absolutely dismiss the UAP phenomenon? Because I'm sure in your media appearances, you run into those type of people all the time in your business.
It's very frustrating for me. I mean, I consider myself very skeptical. I'm very, very rational approach to this topic. I'm someone who's very frustrated with both extremes politically and both extremes with regard to this topic. I think people that believe all of these things are real, or that all of these stories that people tell are real, are being too naive, and you really need to dig in and be a little more discerning, in my view. Equally, I feel people that just dismiss this out of hand are making a huge mistake. Read these books, read about Roswell, just read John Mack's Abduction. This guy is at the top of his game. He's the head of psychiatry at Harvard, and he feels like he thought these people must be delusional. Let me investigate. And he concluded that they weren't, that he thought maybe something like this was really happening. Why dismiss that? Why do we have people get these educational levels and rise to the top of their profession to take their word? And then they tell it to us, and if we don't agree with it, we dismiss it. I think that's ridiculous. I think that people like John Mack at least deserve the respect of their opinion. And I think if you're not willing to dig into this and have a little bit of an open mind to it, that's a shame too, because just dismissing it out of hand, to me, is glaring mistake.
How much credibility do you give these UAP regressions? These people, like I think Betty and Barney Hill were two of the most famous ones. They didn't know too much about what happened,
You mean the
and they had
hypnosis?
these regression hypnosis for abductees, where all this information supposedly comes out that they didn't remember to begin with.
Yeah, I think that there's something to that because uh, Bud Hopkins, David Jacobs, Mary, man, I can't think of names today off my game. I feel like a lot of these people are doing really incredible work with them. And when you hear the same thing repeated, that's a data set that shouldn't be ignored. I do think there's some credibility to this. It's not like they all have different wild stories. Oftentimes, they're very parallel stories. And David Jacobs was meticulous into the room was shaped this way. They walked through this type of door. They whatever. These little tiny things that seem very unlikely that other people would mention. And the fact that they do and that it's repeated to me adds a lot of credibility to that form of investigating.
And as we wind it down here, what do you think about the correlation between Bigfoot and UAPs, which a lot of people say they're seeing a lot of the times in connection with these? And Skinwalker Ranch, we've seen both.
I have a hard time with that as well. I feel that's in that pile of, for me, a bridge too far. Again, we can't find Bigfoot, so then maybe it's alien. I feel like that's just too big of a jump. I think that's a little tough for me to go that far.
Now, Contact in the Desert, it is the biggest convention in the world right now. What do you see for the future other than expanding into the celebrity boxing? Has it reached its peak, or is there more to come? And I'm not saying it
Oh
needs
my
more.
God, no! Until we get full disclosure, and even then, I think there's certainly for the rest of my lifetime, there's going to be a need for this community to come together, exchange ideas, exchange beliefs, learn about these things. I think this is an invaluable resource to people. Whether you have a little interest in this topic or you're knee deep in this, I think this is the place to go to get that information. I genuinely mean that. And so I think it's going to be an invaluable resource for all of us for years to come.
What speaker or guest are you most excited about this year?
Well, the most exciting thing for sure for me is the Diane Hennessy Powell thing, because that's brand new. I've never seen anything like that. The idea that she can work with autistic children who can't speak, they're nonverbal, and yet they seem to be able to exhibit telepathic communication with their mother or other people. That is incredible. We're going to do a live demonstration on stage for like 20 to 30 minutes of this occurring. And then we're going to have Diane and Hakeem and some other people talk about what we just saw and how this might be happening. This is something I've never heard or thought could be possible, and I can't wait to see it.
I forgot to ask you earlier when you were talking about the government stuff. Do you have much faith in this Anna Paulina Luna's disclosure task force that Donald Trump has put her in charge of?
Well, I do have a little bit of hope in it. You know, I had a lot of hope for Arrow. I thought Arrow was going to be great. This might finally be the one. You know, we had Sign, Grunge, Blue Book, Robertson Panel, Condon, all of these things, and they were all garbage. And then Arrow came out, and I was really excited that maybe this will actually lead to something. And then now I feel like it's nothing but disinformation, because we've both interviewed people that have told us they've given direct information to them, and then they come out and say, well, we have no sign of anything. So that tells me that they're not being genuine. I find that whole organization to be disingenuous. So would there be a new task force suddenly that I could believe? I don't know. I have hopes for it. Fingers crossed. Maybe she'll get Grush into a skiff and he could give her some real information. That would be great. So I do have my fingers crossed and a little bit of hope that maybe this is going to be something that will actually lead somewhere. I hope so.
And just to throw this in quick, Ross Coldhart's partner, I know, is a big JFK expert, and that's part of the whole disclosure task force. The first thing, it seems like it might be the Epstein files, but it seems like JFK is going to be before UAPs.
And
What are your
RFK and
RFK?
what's his name? There's three of them. There's RFK, JFK, and
Martin Luther King?
Martin Luther King, MLK. Those are the first three, and Luna said that 4 will be UAPs.
Your thoughts on the JFK assassination?
Well, Danny has thoughts on that. Danny Sheehan has talked about that last year at Contact in the Desert, and I think he revealed who he thought actually killed the president. So I don't know much about that, but I would suspect whatever Danny said is true.
Where can we follow you to get more information on this and keep up to date and listen to your podcast? There's a website for Contact in the Desert.
That's the
Also
best
in the
place to go.
description.
Yeah. Go to Contact in the Desert. Our podcast is on there. We're part of the Coast to Coast AM network. So you could just go on there, though, and catch it right from contactinthedesert.com. We've even got a blog now and all the information about our event. So there's other things on there to check out, too.
And you got a great team of people working with you. There's no doubt that's one of the reasons why you're so successful. I really appreciate you talking to me. What an honor it is to talk to the guy that runs the biggest UAP convention. I'll let you close this off with whatever you want to tell the fans here.
Well, it's always fun talking UFOs, brother. Thanks for having me on again. It's always a fun topic to talk about. It's nothing more fun for me than sitting around a fireside talking about these topics and speculating on what could possibly be happening. I'd like to invite everybody out to Contact in the Desert. This year is already shaped up. If you look at that lineup and you know anything about this community, we are so proud and excited about this lineup of speakers. I've seen nothing like this in my years of going to conferences. I think it's going to be an amazing event. And above all, we have so much fun there beyond everything we learn.